Wahyo Westanik, Ete Oto Teyan, Ewe Wapametan, Ewe Sagehetan, Weya ya, Heya ya, Heya ha.
Oh, grandfather, thank you very much for coming.
That way.
And I would like to offer you some beautiful tea here. I hope you really enjoy yourself and welcome. And I was wondering if you could tell me some stories.
That way. Semak. Ewi Pixwean, Semak. Kaya suspend, Ekotamana Nisukitsi one. The young men, it was a hard winter, a long winter, and all the young men were just really making trouble all over the place. And everybody was getting really annoyed with them. And so one old lady, one old grandma, she said, "Why don't you guys go and fight the Blackfeet? That'll give you something to do."
Oh.
So they said, "Oh my goodness."
Because we were always fighting the Blackfeet.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, and they were always fighting us. And so they said, so they went outside and they talked, boy, she said, she sure is grumpy today. Yeah, I said, well, we were making a lot of noise. But that might be a good idea to go and fight the Blackfeet because spring is coming pretty soon. This might be our last chance to go on a war party this winter. Because they never did used to go on war parties in the wintertime. It just wasn't done. They had respect for each other. They did not fight in the winter. And they had to live, if they were going to fight, somebody always came ahead and told them they were going to fight, and all the women had a chance to hide. And usually they'd run down to the river and they had holes in the banks and they'd go in there. So anyway, someone came ahead of there and told Poundmaker that they were going to fight and that you should hide the women. So he said right away, he said, "Okay, when are you going to be fighting us?" He said, "Well, how about tomorrow, sounds good like tomorrow." "Yes, that'll give women a chance to hide today." And so that day, they told the women, all the old people and all the young children and all the women, they went and hid down by the river. They had holes in the bank there where they could hide just in case of war like that. And then, so the Blackfoot, they got ready. And over there, the same thing was happening over there. The young men were restless. They wanted to go out and fight. They wanted to do something. And the only thing they could think of was to go and fight the Cree. Over there with Poundmakers, because they knew Poundmaker. When he was young, he went to live with Crowfoot, and he lived with him for many years. When Crowfoot's son got killed, because Poundmaker looked like him, and his mother, the young lad's mother there that got killed, well, the mother was still missing him. Every day she was crying. And then Crowfoot, he told he said, "I know where there's a young man looks just like our son. I can take you to see him if you want. It's over with the Cree." He said, yes, I want to. Yeah, so love can go anywhere. So they went over there, and they had a stick with whatever they had on there to show that they were not, and they only took 2 warriors with them, to show that they were not coming for war with just 2 warriors. And so Poundmaker, he sent out somebody there, and they said they want to come talk to you. And it's not about war. And so they went there. And when they got there, Poundmaker, he got food and everything ready, pipe, everything ready. And they sat down and people came, and the old people came, and they talked to them for a while. And then when the time was ready, because they had to follow protocol, they couldn't just jump right into it. They followed protocol, and when the time was ready and they had eaten a bowl of soup and something, then they asked them, "Are you sleepy?" They said, "Yes, we're very sleepy, we're very tired." And it's so young. They said, "We're very sleepy and very tired." "Well, here we have buffalo robes right here for you. You can sleep here. And if your men want to sleep here, they can sleep right here. They don't have to bring their weapons in. They can leave them outside." So they left them outside. And then when Crowfoot spoke, well, it wasn't really Crowfoot. It was another man. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said Crowfoot. It was another chief at that time. Crowfoot had followed later, but it was another chief. And he was a powerful chief. We summoned it just like Crowfoot. He was a powerful chief, and he continued on the way Crowfoot had done. All the good stuff Crowfoot did, he continued on like that.
He was brave.
Yeah, he was brave, strong, yep. And he was wise, and he was humble, and he was he showed humility, and he showed love to everybody. Nobody missed anything in that camp. Everybody ate. They had stuff to eat. So he was a very good chief. So, after the chief and his wife had a good rest, they got up, and once again they were given some soup. And they had that good soup. And then the pipe was over there, and so the chief saw that, and he knew that it was getting time for him to speak. So then, when he stopped, and the woman didn't speak, she just had her head down, then Poundmaker, he took that pipe, and he lit it up, he smoked it, and he passed it over to the chief. Oh, he said, "Speak, squeal. Speak." So then, that man told a story of how a young man from his tribe, he had a beautiful horse, and that horse had been stolen right from inside the tent, sleeping right beside his father and mother. And when they woke up, just minutes later, that young man's throat was cut, and his clothing was gone, and right away they knew that these warriors, they were very good warriors, and they thought, and he yelled really loud, and everybody heard the anguish in his voice with just a terrible cry in his voice that his son, his beautiful son, was gone. The son that he was waiting to grow up that would look after everything that he did. And so right away, warriors came rushing over there, and everybody came rushing over there, and they said, "Get the horses." So they went to get the horses, and already there was about 30 of them gone. And so they said, "Quick, saddle up horses. We're going to ride now." And so they got on there, and away they rode. And they, even in the dark, they could follow the trail. They had a good dog, because they had lots of animals like dogs like that, and they had dogs that could trail. They had dogs that you could sick them on somebody. And they had guard dogs too, but they had killed the guard dog as soon as they come. That's the first thing they killed was a guard dog. And so that guard dog never gave any kind of a sign that there was any kind of trouble. So they went out, they followed that guard dog. And from where they rode, they were kind of like on a hill, and they came down that hill, and it was through a valley, and they rode through the valley, and they headed west. Because they've headed east, I should say. They headed east, where they were just barely, the sun was just barely, and that's where they headed, where the sun was barely coming up. And they rode along there, and by golly, that young man that had gone inside the chief's tent, and had killed that young man, and had taken his clothing, and had taken his horse, was now riding his horse. And so they're riding as fast as they could. When they got up near the camp, where they were going home, he told everybody, he said, "Wait," he said, "you guys go ahead. I'm going to change right here," he said. "I'm going to put on his clothing, and I'm going to ride his horse and clean his horse down a bit." They said, "Well, be careful." So they all rode ahead, and they told everybody in there that he was coming, the man that had killed that young man, and had got that fast horse that everybody loved. It was a beautiful horse, and it was very fast. Well, by golly, he did that. He was cleaned up there, he braided his hair, he kind of washed his hands, and then he rubbed that horse down and gave it a little bit of good food, and pretty soon he jumped on that horse. Just as he was going to jump on that horse, he got chills up his spine, like chills rolled up his spine like that. And he said, "Uh-oh." And he turned around, and there were two warriors like this, and they had their arrows pointed right at him. And that chief was standing there, and he said, "You can die today like a warrior, or you can come over and live with me like my son. You killed my son, you're wearing his clothing, you're riding his horse. Decide. You have just a very short time to decide." Well, that wasn't much of a decision to make. He said, "I will go and live with you." And so he went over there, and he lived with the Blackfeet. And then maybe about 5 years later, his mother loved him greatly because he looked just like her son that she had lost. Even though he had killed her, she wore his clothing. He wore his clothing, rode his horse all the time, and she began to love him like her own son. And the father, him too, because it was brave of him to do that, to come and live with him. Because when he got there, the father had to get everybody, "Put your guns down, put your arrows down. Nobody kill him. This is my son. He has taken the place of my son." So all the men, they understood, and they put their arrows down and their guns down, and nobody even tried to act smart with them or get tough with them or anything, because this was his son. He was the chief's son. So then, he lived like that in a very good way. And then later on, he was the one that caused peace between the Blackfoot and the Cree. So we always tell this story, because it is a very good story. But on the way back, he did get shot with an arrow, and that arrow was inside him, and he used medicine, mud from the creeks that were around there. He used that mud, and they still have that medicine today over there where he came from. Hey, c'est ça. The story is finished. Hey, hey.
Hey, hey.
Wahyo estanik, ete oto teyan, ewe wapame chan, ewe sagehe.